My name is Grace Jackson, and I am the Farmer Services Regional Lead of the Central Valley at CAFF. And I am super stoked to be here with this wonderful group of panelists who we will introduce shortly. I am gonna, introduce myself and then pass it over to Katharina, and then we're gonna get started on the panel presentation. We decided to collaborate with this group of panelists to bring you record keeping today. We believe that record keeping is an essential part of organic certification and a farming operation more generally. We know that farmers and ranchers, y'all don't get into farming to do the administrative work of record keeping, but we know that the benefits of good record keeping extend beyond certification and can enhance daily farm management planning and management decisions. Katharina, take it away.
Thanks so much, Grace. Hi, everyone. My name is Katharina Ullman. I'm the Training and Technical Assistance Coordinator with the UC Organic Agriculture Institute, and have been working with Grace to pull this webinar together. I am just really excited and feel really grateful that we have this wonderful group of experts with us today. I know that Claire from Oregon Tilth is going to give us a great sort of introduction to what's required for record keeping in on organic farms and ranches. And then I think we'll hear from Lauren next, and then Maddie to get both the sort of on the ground perspective of how you actually put this into practice on a farm and on a ranch. So I think with that, we'll go ahead and kick it off. Does that sound good to you, Grace? Awesome. Okay, so our first person presenting is Claire Davis with Oregon Tilth. And Claire, if you can go ahead and start sharing your screen while I read your bio, that would be great. So Claire is a technical specialist on the education and advocacy team of the Organic Certifier Oregon Tilth, where she provides personalized support to producers pursuing organic certification and helps develop educational resources on organic regulations and practices. She works closely with a Transition to Organic Partnership Program, or TOP, in the Northwest region, connecting farmers and ranchers with the tools and guidance they need. So Claire, thank you so much for being here. We're really looking forward to your presentation.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me. Can you guys see my slides okay and hear me okay?
Yes.
Awesome. Okay, well then I will get started. Hi, everybody. Thank you again for joining this session on record keeping for your farm. Like Katharina mentioned, my name is Claire Davis. I work on the education and advocacy team at Oregon Tilth. And Oregon Tilth is based in Oregon, but operates nationwide, including in California. And much of my role, like mentioned, entails working with the Transition to Organic Partnership Program, which is also called TOP. And TOP offers free certifier neutral support to producers who are interested in pursuing organic certification. And we also have a really cool farmer to farmer mentorship program. So although, as you can see on my screen, I personally tend to work in the Northwest region of the TOP program, California producers can contact their TOP representatives here in the West to be connected to those same resources. So without further ado, I will go ahead and get started. So a little about me. Before my current role at Oregon Health supporting farmers, I was a small-scale farmer myself. I grew organic, certified organic, diversified veggies and flowers in the high desert north of Reno, Nevada. And Reno is still where I live, so I'm very close to some of you in California. All right. So, getting into the meat of things, some topics to be discussed today on record keeping. Why record keeping is important and necessary for organic certification. What records you need to keep for certification. SOPs, standard operating procedures, versus keeping specific records and when one is sufficient versus the other. Some existing kind of record keeping templates that are out there that you could use either as your record keeping system or base yours off of it. We'll cover some commonly asked questions surrounding record keeping. Those are always a crowd pleaser. And then I'll end with some kind of personal tips and tricks for keeping up with records when the season gets busy. And just like Grace and Katharina mentioned, we'll do a Q&A at the very, very end of the session after we hear from our farmer friends. So with that, let's talk record keeping. Why the heck is record keeping so important in organic ag and required for certification? So if we zoom way out and we look at the significance and the meaning that the organic seal carries, kind of backed by that rigorous certification process and these well-established standards, at the heart of all of it is consumer trust. If consumers were to lose confidence in the organic seal and what it stands for, the industry would not fare very well. So, how does the National Organic Program maintain consumer trust at such a large nationwide scale? How do we ensure that there isn't rampant fraud with bad actors marketing non-organic goods as organic? So, record keeping is part of the answer. Certifiers only have actual eyes on operations one day out of the year during that operation's annual inspection. So, record keeping, or the diligent tracking of operation details, gives certifiers insight into how your farm is run the rest of the time. There are two main goals to the traceability and resulting transparency that record keeping brings about. The first is to ensure that there's no contamination of organic goods. And the second is to ensure that there's no fraudulent activity, whether intentional or accidental, that could be occurring. So I promise you, it's not just about jumping through hoops. When an organic inspector comes to inspect your operation, if you're pursuing organic certification, there will be two main audits that are performed. And these two audits pretty much determine exactly what records you need to keep, so I really like to explain them in detail to producers. So the first is the traceback audit, and this is where the inspector will choose a random product that you sell, let's say cherry tomatoes, and you will both trace it together from sale or whenever it left your operation all the way back to seed or whenever it entered your operation. For animals and livestock, this would be from the sale of the animal or the animal product all the way back to the origin of the livestock where they purchased, birthed, etc. So for cherry tomatoes, working backwards, you'll look at the sales invoices, then the harvest and storage records, then any inputs that you may have used on the tomatoes or the soil, then the planting and any tending that was done, and finally all the way back to the beginning to whatever tomato seeds or seedlings that you had originally purchased or grown yourself. The goal of the traceback audit is to ensure that organic regulations were met throughout a crop or animal's entire life cycle on your operation. The second audit is called a mass balance audit, and that's just a really fancy way of saying, do the outputs of your farm match the inputs? So for cherry tomatoes, your records indicate you sold 2,000 pounds of organic cherry tomatoes across the season, but your records also show that you only planted 10 organic tomato plants. That is a gross exaggeration, but that would be 200 pounds of cherry tomatoes per plant, which just isn't feasible. And so the question, the very reasonable question from the inspector becomes, where did all those extra organic tomatoes come from? In livestock operations, the mass balance often compares the amount of as-fed rations and pasture that went into feeding your herd with total herd numbers to make sure that those numbers add up. So the goal of the mass balance, it's to ensure that there's no fraud in our organic system or people passing off non-organic goods as organic. So zooming out, when creating your own record keeping system, keep these two audits and their respective goals in mind. All right, let's talk more specifically about what records you need to keep. For crops, seeds, seedlings, and planting stock, you want to keep receipts of the seeds, seedlings, and planting stock that you purchase. You also want verification that those seeds, seedlings, and stock are organic. In the instances where you can't find organic seed or planting stock in the quantity, quality, or form that you need them to be in, you can use non-organic alternatives, but you must first record your earnest efforts to try and source organic options from at least 3 different suppliers. And this is called a commercial availability search, or sometimes informally a seed search. Any non-organic seeds and stock that are purchased must also be verifiably non-GMO and not treated with prohibited substances. So more often than not, all of the information that you need for this will be on the seed company's emailed receipt, or you can just shoot them a quick email requesting that verification and they'll provide it. One more quick note that commercial availability searches or seed searches, these only apply to seeds and planting stock. Any annual seedlings must always be 100% certified organic. Okay, next, planting and field records. You want to record what you planted, when you planted, where you planted, and how much you planted. Remember that mass balance audit. Field activities themselves can be super quickly jotted notes, like I weeded zone A on April 10th, or I crimped the cover crop in zone B in early November, stuff like that. For input materials, on your organic system plan or your application for certification, you will already have a list of all of the inputs that you use on your operation, but your record should detail again what material you used, when and where you used it, how much, and by what method. For example, on April 10th, I dispersed 300 pounds of compost on zone A using a broadcast spreader. And again, that can just be quickly jotted in a notebook. For harvest, transport, and storage, you just want to be tracking how much went in and how much went out. Do you have a harvest log and a storage log? If the truck that's transporting your crops is also used in conventional operations, has it been thoroughly cleaned and has that cleaning been documented? Finally, sales. How much of your product was sold when and to whom? Back to that mass balance tracing, inputs and outputs. A digital invoicing system makes it really easy to keep these kinds of records. For livestock, same concept, different records. You want to start at the beginning with receipts of your purchased animals or records of birthed animals. You want to document all fed rations, including what was fed, when, and to which animals. Receipt for feed purchases should also be kept on hand. And you should document any healthcare inputs as well, including what medication was used when and for what purpose. For ruminants, you should be tracking grazing details. There are regulations requiring that ruminants are on pasture for a good chunk of the year, so you want to document the start and end of your grazing season as well as your pasture rotations. And then for transport, if you transport your animals, keep records on the dates and the transport conditions, as well as clean transport affidavits if the truck is also used for conventional animals. Finally, document your sales. Again, tracking how much or how many was sold to whom and when that transaction occurred. Okay, let's touch base briefly on SOPs versus records. For those who need a refresher, SOP stands for Standard Operating Procedure. An SOP details a specific procedure that is consistent within your operation, like a method or a system of doing something. An example could be your wash and pack, cleaning, and sanitation procedure. The method doesn't change, and the procedure is repeated regularly, like every day or every week. Often, producers want to know when an SOP is sufficient versus keeping a specific record of an activity. So SOPs are perfect for documenting repetitive, low-risk tasks that aren't directly relevant to the organic audit process, like our previous example, cleaning and sanitizing your wash and pack. As long as your inspector and your certifier know the materials that you're using to sanitize, the actual day-to-day details of cleaning your pack station aren't really necessary for organic cert. So SOPs document the how of consistent methods, whereas individual logs and records document what actually happened. So any activity that affects organic integrity typically requires actual records. So let's run through some quick examples. The planting of 200 bed feet of carrots. That relates to the mass balance of calculating inputs and outputs of your operation, so a specific activity record would be needed. How a truck is cleaned between loads, that's a repeated procedure. So an SOP is just fine with maybe a jotting of the date that it occurred. Medical treatments for your livestock. Healthcare inputs are closely monitored in organic systems as they relate to allowed and prohibited substances. So a specific activity record would be needed. And if you ever have a question about what you need to be keeping a record on and what you don't, definitely contact your certifier. They are there to help you. They're also there to make sure you stay in compliance, but they're also there to help you. Okay, we know that the National Organic Program requires record keeping, but did you know that they do not require any specific format for those records? If you are tech savvy and you prefer digital records, love that for you. You should use those. If you'd rather take notes in your farm notebook and the wash and pack, you can do that too. Or if it works for you, you can create a hybrid system using both paper and digital methods depending on the records that you're trying to keep. The National Organic Program highly encourages farmers to use whatever methods work best for them and their farm. At the farm that I managed, we used a hybrid system. So all of our harvest, storage, and sales records were digital via a shared farm iPad and Google Drive, but all of our seeding, planting, and soil amendments were written down. It's just what worked best for us with the systems that we had in place. So the picture on the right in this slide is our actual amendment binder, for example. The inputs for each field were the same across that field, but when we applied them to certain beds at different times, we would sign our initials and mark the date. So that way we kind of could just track when those turnovers occurred. I have in this slide linked my favorite pre-existing templates that exist for record keeping. There's a lot of really good ones out there. There's a spreadsheet version out there for some crops, and for both crops and livestock, there are some paper formats. So I am going to quickly adjust my screen share to show some of these formats that are my favorite. Okay, and if I could just get a verbal confirmation from someone that they can see the new screen.
We can see the new screen.
Thank you so much. Okay, so one of my favorite templates that exists is Organic Association of Kentucky made this fantastic spreadsheet-based record-keeping template for crops. And there aren't a ton of spreadsheet-based templates out there. A lot of them are like printer-friendly more so. But I really like this template. You can download it yourself and either use it directly or just base your own system off of it. But I really like that each tab has a different kind of record that you can keep. So it's kind of nicely broken out for you. You have your seeds and planting stock. Here's your master inputs list. It's just it's very thorough, and I really respect that they made this. The other ones that I like to share with you, these are from the USDA. And so on the left, I have documentation forms for crop producers, and on the right, I have documentation forms for livestock producers. And so these are phenomenal. Every page in it is a different record that you can keep. And again, you can either print these off and just use them directly, or just use them to kind of inform your own record keeping system. The same goes for livestock producers. So check these out. Again, they're widely available. Just look up USDA organic record keeping templates. These are the first ones that come up, but we'll also be sharing these slides after the presentation, so you'll have access to these links. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and share my slides again. All right, team, can we see them?
Yes, thanks.
Thank you, appreciate it. Okay, moving on. Let's cover some of the most commonly asked questions about organic record keeping. So, one, what are the most common record keeping deficiencies? First is not documenting your commercial availability search, your seed search. Remember, you need to contact 3 different suppliers and you must record the date of contact and why the organic options that may have been available didn't meet your needs in terms of quantity, quality, or form. A lot of producers just email seed suppliers and save those email exchanges, and that's more than enough. The second most common one is missing input documentation, like not having a picture of a product label or no OMRI, Organic Materials Review Institute, or certifier approval recorded for that material, or you have missing application dates or something like that. Number 2, do I need individual records for each and every one of my animals? For livestock, ruminants, like larger animals, especially for dairies that might be transitioning animals into organic, you definitely do. Poultry can have kind of a flock or like a house identification rather than individual animal identification. Number 3, do I need records for equipment cleaning? If you are using equipment that is exclusively organic only or dedicated organic, an SOP is totally fine. Just kind of recording if you have a cleaning procedure, what that is and what materials you use. If you have a split operation where you're producing both organic and non-organic goods, or maybe you borrow equipment from a neighbor who's not certified, you definitely would want a cleaning log recorded for that, using the materials that you used as well as like the date that it occurred. Number 4, do record keeping requirements change depending on the size of the farm? This one, a lot of people ask. And the short answer is no. The record keeping requirements are the same no matter what, but the lift can be different depending on complexity more so than size. So complete traceability is required either way, but sometimes small farms grow 40 different crops and sell to 6 different outlets, whereas a large organic farm might grow 2 crops and sell to one outlet. And so the lift on that record keeping is just kind of different. This is where it's important for farmers to develop the system that works best for them. There is no one size fits all for record keeping methodology. Finally, can I ask my certifier about record keeping? Definitely. If you have specific questions about how to keep records or what records you need to be keeping, you can absolutely ask your certifier. A lot of folks don't know that certifiers will offer support and guidance, and that they often employ folks who either were or are farmers like me, or total farm nerds who honestly would love to just chat with you about your operation details. So never feel afraid to reach out to your certifier. Okay. Let's talk about how to effectively keep records. I got my eye on the clock, everyone. So again, develop your system. Every single producer that I have spoken to about records keeps them in different ways. So again, do what speaks to your heart, and maybe more importantly, do what you will actually follow through on. Organized by categories. This really makes inspections straightforward because, like we talked about in the audits, the inspector will want to see specific records across a product's lifespan, and it's really easy to follow records in this way when you have them split out into those categories. Record routinely, daily if possible. If you fall behind on your record keeping, it can be super overwhelming to try and catch up or remember what happened on the farm 2 months ago, let alone 2 days ago for me. And then finally, the NOP requires that you keep your records on hand for 5 years. So don't go throwing them away the moment your inspection is over. Keep them in a safe place, like a dedicated filing cabinet or an organized file folder on your computer. All right, I know from my time on farms that peak season is a lot. Sometimes there's just not enough minutes in the day, but do not let your record keeping slip. These are my favorite tips to help farmers integrate record keeping into your daily operations so it doesn't fall to the wayside when the manure hits the fan. So start by establishing your system well in advance of peak season. Give you and your employees at least a month or two to fall into the habit of keeping records, and reinforce those habits regularly during that training time. Next, remember, face your record keeping fears. Remember, face when designing your record keeping system. F, is it fast? You don't want your record keeping to interrupt your work because no one's going to drop the wheelbarrow to go type something into the computer in the office. Keep the record associated with the task right next to that task. At my farm, we kept our amendments binder on the amendments shelf. So whenever we were amending the soil, the binder was right there to write that information down. A, is it accurate? Is all the required information there, not just what you did, but when and where you did it? C, is it consistent? Build the record keeping process into your daily operations. Make it part of your training plan. For example, the person who washes the eggs each day counts them up and writes the total on the calendar that is hanging right by the egg station. And then finally, E, easy. Can anybody keep this record? Especially when working with a team, make everything as accessible as possible. You don't want just one person in charge of keeping records because nobody can keep track of all the moving parts of a multi-person team doing different tasks simultaneously. So remember, face your record keeping fears, make your records fast, accurate, consistent, and easy. Okay, this is my last slide. I'll go very quickly. Just some resources that I want to recommend. Northwest Top produced a series on YouTube called The Trail of Records. It breaks up the crops record keeping process into 5 short, super consumable videos. And it also includes a few longer interviews with certified organic producers about their own record keeping systems. And then the top website nationwide has a great searchable resource library that you can use to find even more resources on crop and livestock record keeping. So that's all I have. Thank you everyone for your attention. There are, dare I say, thousands of record keeping resources out there. So check the top website at organictransition.org for our resource library. And thank you again for your attention.
Thank you, Claire. Really appreciate your perspective, your farming experience, and your work at Oregon Health, grounding us in the requirements and tips for record keeping. Lauren, do you want to go ahead and share your screen and I will read your introduction? I also want to flag for folks that we are saving time at the end for Q&A, so please pop your questions into the Q&A or into the chat, and we're collecting those to read off to our panelists at the end. And I am happy to introduce our next panelist, Lauren McNees. Lauren grew up in the Bay Area, attended UC Davis, and worked for CAL FIRE and UC A&R for many years. In 2014, she finally had the opportunity to fulfill her dream of homesteading in rural winters when Rainwater Ranch came up for sale. For the first few years, Lauren and her husband Lee farmed the historic citrus orchard while keeping full-time off-farm jobs, and they quickly knew that they wanted to be full-time farmers. In 2019, they made the transition and added cut flower production to their operation, enabling sales in the spring, summer, and fall seasons. In the future, Lauren hopes to incorporate agricultural education and tourism into the farm's activities. All right, Lauren, your presentation is up and you are good to go.
Okay, thank you very much, Grace. Thank you, Claire and Katharina, and thank you to CAFF for putting on this conference. I attended some sessions earlier today, and I just really appreciate that this conference exists for small farms to learn so much. Is the audio okay and everything?
Yeah, you sound great.
Okay, thank you. So here's a few pictures I threw in of my farm, and then I just wanted to hold on. It's not my slides aren't advancing. Oh, there was a delay in the advancement of the slide. Okay. So I just wanted to tell everybody a little bit about our farm. Thank you for the intro about me, Grace. We have 20 acres. Our farm has been certified organic since 2017. But then we added the cut flowers in 2019, and I think they became certified in 2020, if I'm remembering correctly. Certified organic production is just really important to my husband and I, and so we're very proud to be able to do that and share our experience with other farmers as well. We grow Washington navel oranges and Lisbon lemons. We have 7 acres of citrus. And we also grow cut flowers, as I mentioned, and we sell them in the form of fresh flowers and dried flowers. We sell at farmers markets and we sell to local grocery stores and to some florists. So that's a little bit of information about our operation. Okay, hopefully there won't be a delay in the advancement now. Here we go. So I wanted to talk about the record keeping tools that we use after Claire gave a really good intro about the record keeping that's required, because then the next question becomes, how is the best way to do all of this? And so in our operation, we use a mix of tools. We use notepads and pens. And so there's a picture of our harvest log there, which we keep on a clipboard on our harvest UTV, and we write down what we harvest when we harvest it. And then later, when we have some downtime, maybe every couple of weeks, when we find a time in our schedules where there's a little bit of extra time, we take that data and we put it into a spreadsheet. And for our farm, we use Google Sheets. We're kind of Android users here, but I know there's equivalent tools with other platforms. And so Google Sheets is nice because you can access it from a computer, you can access it from your phone, you can have multiple users. It's not just on one isolated computer that maybe one person has access to. We also use Google Keep, which is a notes app. We use this all the time, and I think there's a lot of other similar apps out there, but we use it for input records. We do some like day-to-day chores, kind of to-do lists on there, and I'll go into that more as we move on to the next slides. Taking photos is also a great way to keep records. Whenever I purchase a new input and have the receipt in front of me, I snap a photo of it real quick, or I'll snap a photo real quick of the label of the package. Because you never know when that receipt might get lost between the seats or whatever. And so it's really easy to find those photos on your phone later. And then lastly, we use QuickBooks for sales records and invoicing. But these are just what we have found works for us. There's a lot of different ways to do record keeping, like Claire said. The first thing that I wanted to share is our farm map. So this is a good document for identifying what's where, what's organic, what's not organic, if you have not organic areas. This works pretty well also for identifying where your natural resource management is. So if you have hedgerows or you have bat boxes, or anything like that, you can put these on your farm map, and then that shows to your inspector that you are managing your natural resources. And then on the next slide, I think it's the next slide, I'll show the flower field map, which is that one that's outlined in blue, where I get into a lot more detail about the actual crops that are being grown, whereas the one that's outlined in green on the left is our citrus orchard, where it's pretty much all one thing. And so I don't have to keep a more detailed record. That's like a permanent orchard. Oh, okay. I guess we're going to talk about the planting plan before we talk about the field map. So the planting plan, this is a document that I've developed myself, but there's templates out there that you can start with. This took a few years of just kind of trial and error of what worked well for our farm. It's just in Google Sheets. It's just a very basic spreadsheet. And so I have each row represents what I'm going to plant, what I'm planning on planting, and then I have columns that indicate when do I plan on planting it, and then columns for when do I actually plant it. So it kind of serves as a planning document and a record keeping document of the actual work that was done. And so this we can use to show our certifier what we did in the greenhouse when we started seedlings, how many we started, and then when we transplanted them into the field, how many did we transplant? So basically, what's the acreage or the bed feet of what we're growing, and then and yeah, so the dates, amount planted, what we grew, and then if we started it ourselves or if we bought seedlings. This is our field map. So this is actually a map, even though it's a spreadsheet. So each row or each line here represents one bed in our flower field, because we manage our beds individually. We don't have like large blocks of any one thing. And so I like using Google Sheets for this as well, because I can access it from my phone if I'm out in my field and I need to look, when did I plant something, or what was I growing on this exact bed last year, or various other details. And it's helpful that it can be accessed from the phone or the computer. I use the computer to usually do the updates, and I update this document whenever we make a change to a bed. So whenever we transplant something or whenever we mow something, is when I'll make a change to this document. And it usually ends up being once or twice a week. Here's a little more information about how I use that map. I put dates on that flower field map too, and so those dates and the amount planted can be matched back to the planting plan to confirm the amount that we're growing for the trace back audit that Claire was talking about. It's also a way that we confirm crop rotation, because crop rotation is one of the records that our inspectors typically ask about. So we can show the map from this year, the map from last year, the map from the year before that, and show that we're not growing the same thing on the same bed. And oh yeah, and then I mentioned that I usually update this document about once a week. Inputs. Inputs are a really important thing to be organized with, I found, because leading up to the inspection, sometimes I'll have trouble finding a receipt that is maybe from like 6 months ago, and that's just so time consuming to be searching everywhere for a receipt. And so that's why I think taking pictures before you lose them is a really good idea. And here's an example in this photo of me holding a phone. That's the Google Keep app that I used. So it's kind of hard to see in that photo, but it's basically just notes that I wrote to myself on my phone. Whenever we sprayed a pesticide in 2025, I put it in this Keep document, this Keep note on my phone, and then it's all there whenever it needs to be referenced. I also wanted to just mention that for inputs, it's important to get your inputs added to your materials list before you use them. That's something that we've forgotten to do before. I think most farmers have forgotten to do that at some point or another, but it can be really tricky if you don't have it added ahead of time. So inputs, in summary, I just think of as anything that comes from off the farm that is going to go into the soil. And that includes even things that you might not normally think about, like lumber for building a greenhouse. So if you kind of think about it in that rudimentary sense of like, is it coming from off the farm? Is it going into your soil? Then it's probably considered an input, and you have to think about what kind of record keeping or approval will be required for it. Purchasing seeds and plants. We must purchase organic seeds and plants if they're available. Claire did a good job explaining the seeds search process that you need to document, which comes up for us every year. We can never find everything that we need. We can never find every seed that we need in organic form. And ultimately, we can't find a lot of the seedlings that we want for cut flowers in organic form. So we start all of our own seeds on our farm, except for some perennial things that are considered planting stock. One thing that has gotten tricky for me in the past is you do have to get a non-GMO statement from the seed seller if you're buying non-organic seed. And so you don't necessarily want to be buying a little bit of seed from this company and a little bit of seed from this company. And then before you know it, you've bought seed from like 10 different companies. And then you have to go get non-GMO statements from 10 different companies. So I found that it's helpful to identify like the top 3 to 5 seed companies that you want to purchase from. And then you don't have to go chasing that non-GMO statement from a whole bunch of different companies. And if you buy conventional seed, it has to either be raw seed or NOP compliant treatments or pelleting if they're going to have treatment or pelleting, and just make sure you get that pre-approved. How am I doing on time, Grace? I'm trying to watch it myself, but I'm worried that I'm taking a little longer than I thought.
Yeah,
Okay.
I do think we need, sorry, I'm just checking my time stamps. I think
I'll
if you
speed
could
up.
start wrapping up, that would be
Okay.
helpful.
Okay. Harvest log. Yeah, we find the harvest log to be super helpful, not just for organic certification, but for kind of knowing our cost of production and informing our future plantings. Like I said earlier, we handwrite it on a notebook in the field, and then we put it into Google Sheets, and then it should match up with your sales records later. And so this is just a quick screenshot of our harvest log. On the left, it just shows how we input the information into Google Sheets. That's all we have to input is that one on the left. And then on the right, those are charts and graphs that are automatically generated from the data that's inputted on the left. And so it's really helpful in crop planning for the next year and just to reflect on what you did last year to be able to see that data. And then sales records, we use QuickBooks for this. It's fairly easy to generate reports. And it's also kind of expensive. There's a lot of different things that you can use for invoicing and sales. A lot of people use QuickBooks. There's a lot of resources out there for it, but there are other alternatives. But this is just a screenshot of a quick report that I ran. It took me like 2 minutes to generate this report, and it shows me so far in 2026, I've sold 694 pounds of lemons. And so at the end of the year, I can generate reports like this for the whole year for any crop or all crops, and then be able to match it back to the amount that we harvested. Okay, and then this is just a summary slide, but since we're short on time, I'm going to go through it. And then I have some advice. Just being organized is really important. Things like having another farm deliver for you, or sharing equipment with another farm, or receiving another farm's products on your farm can sometimes be complicated. And then you might potentially get into needing a handler OSP. which is another whole set of records. So maybe ask your certifier about those things before you decide to go with them. And calling your certifier when you have questions, like Claire said, is really helpful. And CCOF, the certifier that we use, they have online office hours, which I found to be really helpful for general questions. So there's a lot of resources out there so that you can learn and ask your questions. And then making friends with other organic farmers, I think, is important because we always talk to each other about the things that we're trying to figure out or struggling with, and bounce ideas off each other. So thank you. That's it for my presentation. Here are some pictures of bugs on flowers, which is one of the ways that I document biodiversity in our field, and I share that photo album with our certifier. And thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Lauren, for sharing all your tips and experiences with record keeping on your farm. We're going to now transition to Maddie Young, and as that Maddie is sharing her screen, her presentation, I'll go ahead and do an introduction. So Maddie Young has been on the Stemple Creek Ranch team since 2018 after earning her animal science degree from Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. Although she has held several different roles within the company, managing ranch record keeping and the annual organic inspection has always been a constant. She loves working in agriculture and food and the many challenges and joys that come from it. And she's going to be sharing about her record keeping experiences and tips. So passing it off to you, Maddie. Your slides look great.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Did this first one change? Good to go?
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. Hello. Yes, so I'm with Stemple Creek Ranch and we have organic beef. So slightly larger than lemons, but a lot of what Lauren was talking about, we have so many similarities between livestock and crops, but then also a lot of differences too. So I love learning about the crops enterprises as well. Stemple became certified organic back in 2008. So before my time at the company, my boss Lauren, who's the owner of the ranch, got certified back then, and so he kind of passed the torch to me when I started, so like 10 years into him doing the certification. And with our certification, we have to certify our animals, but then we also have to certify our land. And so that for us is fairly simple with the land because we're certifying pasture land and we're not harvesting and selling hay even from our pasture land. We're simply letting our animals graze on it. So that side of things, the crop side of things is much more simple for us. And with raising beef cattle versus dairy, our cattle are all grass-fed, grass-finished. And so it's simpler than dairy operations in terms of what feed and inputs and things like that, and like time in barns and things like that, or time grazing and everything. Our cattle are grazing kind of 24/7 all year round, so we do have that advantage on our side of it being fairly simple in that regard. But just to give you some background, we sell our organic beef to some local grocery stores. So we keep this program kind of as a bulk wholesale program, and so our stores buy our beef in a sort of this bulk format. It's called box beef, and I'm going like this with my hands because the boxes are big and they have handles to grab. And the box beef is what the grocery stores further break down and then are able to put into their case. And so through certifying organic for this process, then we're able to have that approval to give those stores butcher case dividers and stickers and things like that so that they can label the product as organic in the store and have it out on display as organic. And so originally we worked with MOCA, Marin Organic Certifying Agency, and as of last year of 2025, we switched over to CCOF. We really liked working with MOCA, but they ended up needing to stop certifying livestock producers. And so that's what made us make the switch over to CCOF. And it's been going really well with CCOF. I'm really liking their processes, and they're really, really helpful. And that's something that Lauren touched on, of working with them and asking them questions that I touch on again down the line in the slides, because they were able to just answer my questions clearly and just kept help guide us through it, especially in our first year, because last year was the first time getting used to their paperwork. And there's a lot of similarities if you ever have to switch certifiers. Of course, there's going to be, it's all under the same kind of standards and everything, but there's just differences and in sort of the process. And so it was nice to have their help to make it smooth for us. And so for my role at the ranch, I do our record keeping, and I currently am more involved in our teams management on our meat side of the business, and do some things involved in our wholesale program. But record keeping for the ranch is something that I've kept up with over the last 7 years and that I really enjoy. I think on the call when we were preparing for this, we joked that I was like the wrangler of the wranglers. So I am not on the ground with the animals as much as our ranch hands and my boss and the owner, Lauren. But I am out there and meeting up with them and texting them and getting records from them that I then take and input into our system, which I think was a really helpful thing to have a person dedicated to that, because it just, gets really busy when you're physically on the land and you're not in front of a computer as much. So that's where I can kind of fill in the gap for our company. So this is not a very beautiful slide, but this is where we keep our certification records. And so you'll see I've got last year's folder here, and then I started this year's already. We have our inspection next month, and we started that immediately after the inspection of last year. And what I've learned over the 7 years that I've done this is to just keep up your record keeping as you go, as both speakers already said, but also to digitize where you can. I found to be really, really helpful, and I do think it's more helpful for the certifiers because it's much easier to just share an Excel sheet or Google sheet or whatever you use and just blast it off to them versus having to, I used to scan documents, scan in calving books, like go through kind of all that physical paperwork that can be really time consuming and feel really overwhelming, especially when you're doing something like a tag trace back on it, like for us on an animal, because it's much, much easier to search that in a Google sheet and find the tag versus dig through a bunch of paperwork. So that is one of my biggest recommendations that I got better at over the years. So as I mentioned, we certify crops and animals. So crops fresh are pasture. And so for us, we own a decent amount of the pasture land that we graze our animals on, but we also lease some. And so needing to know the land history of the leased pasture is really important, and knowing about any prohibited materials or things like that. Like for example, on this ranch, this is Black Mountain Ranch, there was a fire years back. I want to say, maybe 2013 or something years ago, and fire retardant was sprayed. And so that section of the ranch had to be fenced off. So that was documented on our map and put into our records. And so we had to keep that within our records for a certain amount of time to document that animals were not on that space. So just kind of an interesting tidbit. And then similar with what Lauren was saying about tracking inputs, for us, inputs, an example of an input would be compost. So if we are buying the compost, providing the certificate for it and clean out affidavits for the trucking and everything like that for something like compost. And then also, I think a lot of small farms are already doing this, but if you're not, keeping track of your land management through photos and documenting things, I think is a really big piece of it. And I'm going to jump to this next slide to show an example. This is a riparian area that was able to get repaired over time, that's been tracked in our records, that gives your certifier and just any other folks that you might be applying for grants with or things like that. It's really helpful to have this kind of data over time to track the kind of work that you're doing on your ranch, because it can give this really clear and easy visual. And in the organic paperwork, there's been an increasing amount of I guess interest is kind of a weird word, but like um, increasing amount of sections and things to fill out regarding your natural resource management and how you're taking care of the land. It's not just about tag tracebacks and things like that. They're really tying in the health of the land and the soil and your practices. And so I really just recommend that piece of it and creating folders for this and tracking timelines and things like that. And then on this previous slide, one thing that I wanted to touch back on here, RDM versus amount fed. So that was touched on a little bit in relation to livestock, I think from Claire, where with our grazing pastures, we need to also give some records on the residual dry matter in those fields, and then comparing that with how much hay we fed, things like that, that you'll want to track and just keep an eye on, which I'll touch a little bit more on regarding livestock. And then this was just an example, spreading compost. So whether you purchased it or made it on site, if you made the compost on site, you'll need to show your records of turning it and everything like that and how it was made. And we also document just a lot through photos, which is really helpful. And then, like I mentioned, clean out affidavits for trucks and things like that that you'll need if you hired someone to do it or if you do it yourself, so you don't have any issues there. So for livestock, the biggest piece for this is being able to do trace back. So plugging in your tags and having them in one big herd list is really important. And that's something I've worked on just in the last couple of years, going from what's on the left here of a calving book to a herd list. And these two actually don't correspond, but they're just examples. And so the calving book on the left is recorded by our ranch hand, and he does a great job of this, of taking down the calf number, the mother's number, ear tag number, and then the month and day they were born and the year. And so then my job is inputting it into our system and keeping track of it. And then within that system, you have your birthing records, you have your cull records, you have your sick records, and you have your harvest records. And so that gives you this really clean way of being able to track when an animal was born and when it was harvested, and then also where it was sold to. So I really recommend that. It can be a little time consuming to get started, but it's so much easier to go back and do a tag trace back, and you can do it right there in the moment with your inspector of, okay, you want to know where this exact box came from, and let's look at the lot and then find the tag. So super recommend that. It's been really a game changer on my end. So yeah, like I mentioned, that's kind of the list of things for herd lists. Oh, and I didn't say breeding stock as well. We have some non-organic breeding stock that we track in there as well. And then animal inputs. If you buy any organic hay, you have to do the same sort of thing where the amount fed matches up with the amount you're grazing your animals, and that it shows that you're meeting their residual dry matter requirements and things like that. And then if you feed them any supplements, just make sure they're not on the prohibited list and have the labels for those. I found that to be really important. And so get those approved if you're adding something new. So my boss will send me, hey, I want to start feeding this to the cows. Please get this approved and make sure we're good to go. And so that's kind of our process of just stopping and checking before we move forward. And then same with vaccines as well, making sure they're all on the approved list and tracking those and providing those labels and making that really easy for your certifier to access them and show them where they are on the property. And then tag tracing here, big piece of it. How we do that is we have organic animals with a yellow ear tag, conventional or just our grass-fed animals with a blue ear tag. So that's kind of the simplest way we go about it. And then this just gives you an example of how we are able to potentially do a tag trace back. And so we have an affidavit. This is just a little snippet of it. There's kind of more detailed paperwork, but this is our trucking paperwork that provides the animal tag numbers And then those tag numbers are then assigned to a lot. And I highlighted up there, the lot is then what you get your paperwork back on your organic cuts. So this is just an example of what we do. And then we are able to then go back and find the exact case that we sold and where we sold it to. And so that's an example of a trace back from, butcher case back to calf born. And so then on the label, we're able to see the lot number and confirm the organic status. And then that allows us to be able to then review where it went, because our inventory system tracks lots, but then also to be able to do similar things like what Lauren did with lemons, of being able to pull our records of, okay, here's how many organic beef we sold, and here's how many we raised. And so doing that, making that connection to make sure that everything lines up, and that our numbers are correct, so that we aren't overselling on organic beef, and that we have the records to show that. And then just showing here an example. So our stores, we give them these butcher case dividers. We give them signage that has USDA organic seal, and then we just get approval from the certifier, but we produce a sticker like this one here. And so we put their little logo on it, the CCOF one, and then the USDA seal. And then once the certifier approves that, we're able to distribute these to the stores for them to put on the product. So simple summary really echoes a lot of what Lauren said and Claire. Record as you go. I really recommend taking lots of photos, and digitize when you can, and call your certifier, because they're really helpful.
Thank you so much, Maddie. That was a great presentation. You all are so organized, and I'm so very impressed and grateful to all of you for your presentations, and to you, Lauren and Maddie, for joining us and representing livestock, perennial crops, and annual crops. It's great to have that diversity. We are going to move into Q&A, and we have some questions that have come in through the Q&A box, and welcome other questions from folks in the audience. I'm going to start us off. We have a couple of questions around, I guess, record keeping mediums. So have any of you all tried software that's specific for organic record keeping? I know that there are some like farm management softwares out there that may make record keeping easier or claim to. And then another question about Write in the Rain notebooks, which look like kind of all-weather notebooks to keep your paper records.
Yeah, I can kick us off on this one. There are farm management softwares out there that you probably know of that can help you with your record keeping. I think there are a handful of like organic specific record keeping softwares out there that I'm not super familiar with myself, and I haven't specifically talked to farmers who use them, but I think like Farm Bright is an example. There's one called like COG Pro. What we used on the farm was we used Tend, and that really helped us track our seeding records, our planting records, our farm maps, our harvest records. And so that was pretty helpful for us. But yeah, there's like a lot of options out there, and it's hard to recommend just one because not all of them are suited to just one operation type, or a lot of them are suited to just one operation type. So yeah, hopefully that helped a little bit, but there's options for sure.
Yeah, I can add to that too. I haven't tried any of the software that has been developed specifically for record keeping for farms or for organic production. There's just going to be a certain amount of trying stuff, see if it works for you or if it doesn't work for you, and then trying something else, and then you're going to eventually get to, okay, this is the method that works best for my brain and for my operation. And that's just part of the process of like starting a new farm and going through the trial and error that it takes. And it's fun too, because then once you get to the thing that works for you, you're happy with it. And the Write in the Rain notebooks are a really cool product. I have used them before. I think for me, I just have a really hard time spending like $25 on an expensive notebook when I could spend like $2 on like a regular notebook. Because expenses in small farming, they really add up. But I think they are cool notebooks. So in the meantime, we just try to remember to put things away before it rains.
I have not used any of those. I've just kind of used mostly the Google software stuff that's worked well for us, but not opposed to exploring other ideas in time.
Thanks so much for that question and for those answers. This next question has to do with differences for different kinds of livestock. So Maddie shared great examples of what they do at their operation in relation to beef cattle. But Claire, I'm wondering if you could speak to how that might be different for people who are raising chickens for eggs or broilers or another livestock type.
Totally. A lot of it is the same. Poultry folks have it easier than like large animal raisers. You can do a lot of like bulk records with poultry. Like I think I mentioned you can have a flock ID as opposed to IDing every individual animal, or you can do it by house. And that's because usually if you're doing medical treatments for a chicken, you're doing them all at once or like a vaccine schedule of some kind. But a lot of it's the same. You want to keep track of the feed that you're buying and how much you're feeding, because that kind of goes into that mass balance audit that I was talking about as well. And then if you're raising eggs, you just want to, yeah, you want to keep track of how many eggs you're getting, and how many you're selling. And then if you're raising broilers, yeah, you want to keep track of the sale of those animals and the transport of those animals. So a ton of crossover between those and everything that Maddie talked about, but maybe slightly more straightforward with poultry, more batched. And of course, no need to track like grazing or anything that you would need to track for ruminants. So, yeah.
Thanks, Claire. There's another question about record keeping requirements for saving your own organic seed. And I'm wondering, Claire, I think you know the answer, and I'm wondering too, Lauren, if maybe you have some practice with this.
I can start us off. Yeah, if you want to save seed, that's totally great. And if you're a certified organic operation saving seed, then your seed is certified organic. Well done. You just want to keep track. You want to have that traceability in your records so that the following year, when you plant your saved seed, the inspector knows where that seed came from. And so you can have lot numbers, or you can write on the bag, like harvested 2025 from field A, calendula, something like that, just so that that inspector has that like transparency into where you got that seed. And of course, while you're growing the plants, make sure you're keeping track of the inputs that you're putting on the plants. It's all very tied into what we've already discussed today. Quick note, if you're going to sell seed as certified organic, make sure it's on your organic certificate as a product that you sell. That's important. Even if you're just selling veggies, but you're selling seed on the side, it needs to be on your organic certificate for you to sell it using the organic seal.
Thank you, Claire. Yeah, we save our own seed for a few things that we grow here. And usually at the start of the year, I write myself a list of the things that I know I'm going to want to save seed for, because I know that seed saving is easy for that crop and germination is good from my saved seeds just based on experience. Um, and then I put them in like a brown paper bag and I write the date and what it is. And usually the inspector wants to see my box full of saved seeds and I show it to them, and it's pretty easy and fun and saves a little bit of money on a few things.
Thanks so much for that. This next question is maybe veering slightly away from record keeping into certification just in general, but we'll ask it anyway, which is, what is the average cost of getting a small farm certified organic? And maybe Claire, you can share your thoughts on that first, or
Yeah.
you could be the main person just so no one has to say how much they're paying.
Totally. Yeah, that the number that's most often thrown around because it's accurate is it's about $1,000 to $1,500 annually for a small farm to get certified. It could cost you less, it could cost you slightly more. It kind of depends on how complex your operation is. If you're certifying under multiple scopes, like you're doing crops and livestock, your certification will cost a bit more. Um, and then different certifiers all have different fee schedules, but they are required to make those publicly available. So you can either check a certifier's website or give them a call, and you should be able to get a pretty clear idea of what certification will cost you before you sign up for it. Some certifiers have like a static inspection fee, and other certifiers charge inspection fees by the hour. And so in those instances, you are incentivized to have your record keeping really in order so that your inspection goes nice and quickly and efficiently and saves you money as well. But yeah, that 1,000 to 1,500 is like a solid starting point for small farms.
And I wanted to add to that, I had a note binder print. I really recommend printing out your records and having a big binder for the inspection, even though I'm like, oh, digitize. But for that purpose, it's so helpful because then if you're out in the field and looking at something, you're not relying on searching in your laptop and you can just quickly show your inspector. They could take a photo and then you move on. Otherwise, you might end up with a lot of follow-up afterward of, oh, I need you to get me that later. So if you can have it all right there in the moment, it'll go much faster.
I might, just to jump off those 2 points, inspection for many certifiers, how much it costs to get certified, is a function of how long it takes for your operation to be inspected. So if you have a really complex operation like Claire was talking about, it'll take longer. But if you're not organized with your records, or you don't have them in a printed out binder the way Maddie was talking about, that's also another way that it can take longer and then drive up the cost of the inspection process and the certification fee. So that's one thing to be aware of. The other thing is that because different certifiers have different fee structures for their certification fees, the best way to compare prices is by calling up 3 certifiers and asking them to give you an estimate for your operation so that you can compare apples to apples. And they're usually pretty happy to do that. So I just wanted to mention that too. Grace, do we have any other?
That was my experience too,
Oh, yeah.
Katharina. Shopping around is a great plan.
I did that too last year.
Thanks.
Thanks, y'all. I think something that I just want to hear more from Maddie about, and maybe it's not such a, yeah, I don't know that you'll have much to say other than maybe just expanding on what you shared, that in order to be a certified livestock operation, you also have to certify the land that the livestock is on. And so in practice, does that mean that you're filling out an OSP, an organic system plan, as a crop producer would for that land, and an additional OSP for the livestock?
Yeah, so there's two sections of it. And so when doing it through doing the crops side, there's a lot of paperwork that I get to skip, which is exciting. Every time I'm like, oh, don't have to do that one. So you go through the process and then there's plenty that doesn't apply. So they just understand what doesn't apply on your ranch and then you skip it. And then based on your operation, yeah, they understand. Or sometimes I think you'll say like NA at the top of it and move on, kind of a thing.
Okay, great. Thank you. And Katharina, I think you might be doing the last question and then we can wrap things up.
Great, thanks so much. The last question has to do a little bit with purchasing transplants or planting stock. What are the record keeping requirements around purchasing transplants and planting stock in in annual and perennial systems?
Totally. So for any transplanted annuals, those must always be 100% certified organic. So if you're buying them in pots from another operation, they have to be certified organic. For perennials, They do not need to be certified organic, provided you do that commercial availability search process. I know firsthand. So, something that the National Organic Program really strives for is what we call sound and sensible, which is like we really want to protect the integrity of the organic industry, but we don't want to kneecap farmers from being able to operate. And so, there's maybe not that many organic options out there for caneberries, for example. So in that instance, you would go through the process of doing that search just to make sure that there aren't organic options available to you. And if you had to end up buying those 5 gallon pots from a non-certified organic operation, that's totally fine. Just keep track of your efforts to contact those 3 suppliers first, and then keep diligent records of when those plants entered your operation, when maybe you planted them in the soil, and like when they became yours. And there should be a pretty clear cutoff of like no more synthetic substances were applied once those plants like came onto your operation. One more thing, if you're getting berries, those berries, even if they're bought from a non-organic source, those can be harvested as a certified organic crop within the same year. If you are trying to take cuttings from those plants and sell additional planting stock as certified organic, those must be under organic management for a full year before you can sell certified organic cuttings. So, just an important clarification there.
Thanks so much with all the record keeping alongside it. Lauren, do you have anything to add to that?
Not specifically, other than the fact that what Claire described, it's a very doable process. We purchase some perennial planting stock, as it's called, and keep track of when we bought it and when we planted it, and it is a doable process. So, but again, like just ask your certifier about what you're thinking about doing before you do it, so that you know. That's what I've always done. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. This does mark the end of this session. We're going to post a poll to get y'all's thoughts and feedback on this. And as that poll is up, I also just want to give a big round of applause to Claire, Lauren, and Maddie. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise and your knowledge. It's so great to have just have your generous spirit here in this webinar today. And also thanks to everyone who showed up today and asked such great questions. We really, really appreciate it. And we hope to see you at one of the other webinars.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for hosting.
Thanks, y'all.
I think that's it. So I'm gonna leave this room. Have a
Cool.
great day.
Thanks,
All right,
guys.
y'all. Thank you.
Bye.